If you're interested in forming a technology, what types of issues do you need to consider when you're determining which entity to form? Of course, this is after you've made the determination that you've got a viable technology. You should form a business entity when you have more than one founder. This is important because if you are working together with another individual or other individuals in the company, you want to make sure that you're clear as to who owns what equity in the company. You want to clear up these misunderstandings very early in the operation of the company. Another reason why you want to form a business entity is when you have intellectual property. This is important because if you have more than one founder who's developing intellectual property and that founder ends up leaving the company will not have access to all of the intellectual property if it hasn't been assigned to the business entity. Another reason to form a separate business entity is when you're going to be hiring workers. If you need to hire employees or independent contractors, it's important for the company itself, that's a separate business entity, to enter into that agreement with the employee or with the independent contractor and not an individual founder. Also, if a contractor is creating intellectual property, you want to make sure that you have a business entity so that contractor can assign their intellectual property to the business entity. If you're a technology company, you definitely need to form a business entity before you get financing, especially from venture capitalists. Venture capitalists require that you set up as a Delaware C corporation. We're going to be discussing this particular business entity in another video, but this is an important entity to set up because venture capitalists will only invest in Delaware C corporations. It's important to make sure, if you are considering getting venture financing, to set up your company pretty early in its existence so that you can issue each of the founders inexpensive stock. That way you can justify that the stock of the founders is so much less expensive than the stock of the venture capitalists that are investing in the company. You'll definitely want to set up an entity if you're interested in issuing options to employees or contractors. This is a common way that technology companies compensate the people who work with the company. And in order to issue options, the company has to set up a corporation. Another reason that a technology company will want to set up a particular business entity is for liability purposes. If you set up a particular business entity, then you can avoid personal liability for the debts and the obligations of the company. If founders of a company are not U.S. citizens or not resident aliens, then they should talk to an immigration attorney about setting up a company to legally operate their startup. The final reason why founders of a technology company should set up a company is to start the capital gains holding period. When founders of a company sell their stock in the company, this is a taxable event. And in order to obtain the more favorable capital gains tax rate, as opposed to the ordinary income tax rate, then it's important for the founders to hold that stock for more than 1 year. Oftentimes, founders of technology companies are able to pretty quickly sell their companies. So it's important to set up the companies as early as possible in order to start the capital gains holding period. If you want to start a technology company and you're currently working for another company, it's important to do these 7 things before you leave your current employer. First, you want to look at all of the employment documents that you have signed with the current employer. These employment documents include an employee offer letter, a confidential information inventions assignment agreement, It could include a stock option plan. And there may also be an employee handbook, a conflict of interest policy, and other employment documents of the employer. It's just important to keep in mind what are the provisions around competing with your employer. Are there provisions dealing with non-solicitation of employees and customers? And also, you want to make sure you look for confidentiality provisions so you understand what you are and are not able to disclose of your current employer's intellectual property. The second thing you want to do is that you want to return any confidential information that you've received from the employer. So the employer can't accuse you of taking any information to start your new company. Third, you should be sure to limit any of your activities on your company before you resign. You can likely talk to investors and talk generally or develop generally the technology that you're working on. But if you develop intellectual property, the employer could claim that they own the intellectual property that you're developing for your company. You should also prepare for an exit interview that you're going to do with your employer, and be sure that you're not misrepresenting the company that you're getting ready to develop. Fifth, you want to stay on good terms with your employer. It's important to do this so the employer doesn't come back after you've left the company and started your own company and claim that you've taken any of the intellectual property of the employer. Sixth, you want to make sure if you have stock options that you exercise the stock options if possible and affordable. And you want to understand any other benefits that you may have. And finally, it's important to consult with an attorney to make sure you understand what your obligations are to your employer.